It's Jimmy Carter. We talked a lot about in the first two videos, of course, the economy. Bad economy. Crisis of confidence. Americans don't like to be told that they're using too much energy, especially when the oil shocks happen and then supply goes down, price goes up, inflation happens, nothing's going on in the economy. It's stagflation. Carter comes in, not just peanuts, an outsider. They vote for him. They think he's going to be awesome. Turns out he doesn't really know how to get things done in Washington. I personally think he's on a higher moral plane than a lot of the politicians. Unfortunately, that means he can't get stuff done. So what I need you to do is flip over your paper. Hear me flipping it over, and let's go ahead and get started on human rights foreign policy. Now, this is one of the reasons why I love Jimmy Carter. He makes human rights a priority. He is not one of the presidents that is okay with, loss of life in places happens, it's something that happens. He puts a commitment to human rights in his foreign policy. So if you ever see any test question, anything like that, anything about Carter's foreign policy, one of the platforms of his foreign policy is the fact that he is committed to human rights. He is going to, and underneath human rights, let's go ahead and he speaks out against oppressive, repressive regimes in Latin America and apartheid, of course, the segregation in South Africa. When we're thinking Nelson Mandela right here, okay? He is going to reform the CIA to operate within the law, but only briefly because he's only a 4-year, one-term president. He negotiates the return of the Panama Canal to the Panamanians. Now, this is going to go under its own his own little bullet point down here on your paper, but he thinks it's the Panamanians' land. They should have access to the Panama Canal. A lot of presidents before, after, now, people now think, oh my God, why did you do that? The Panama Canal connects, of course, Asia to the rest of the world and Europe, and if we control it, we can make money and control the seas. Remember the influence of sea power by Alfred Thayer Mahan and Teddy Roosevelt, basically is responsible for the Panama Canal. Carter's going to take some flack on that. And I'm not going to lie, I kind of think that was stupid too. But I do agree that his commitment to human rights is what is making him try and turn some of this stuff around. Especially about the speaking out about the Latin American and the apartheid South African regimes as well. And he also really tries to take and put the CIA to where they are legal, if you will, and they look like they are doing the right thing. This is something that, of course, Nixon used the CIA in South America to take out Salvador Allende, the Chilean president. You've got lots of things going on, CIA, you have Bay of Pigs, that kind of stuff. And they're starting to get a bad rap, but you know me, I'm a military brat. I don't have a problem if you're a ruthless dictator who hurts people if somebody takes you out with a silencer. But you know me, and you know I'm biased, so I'm sorry for that. And don't judge me. I put this on tape. Oh well, hope you're not judging. But Carter really does take and say, humans have rights. They all have rights. So do not do anything that you wouldn't want done to you. And I really respect that. But the one thing that we really have to talk about as far as something that is respected by Carter's administration in that time period is basically the most amazing peace agreement in the 20th century, the 1900s. There was obviously a dispute between Israel and the Arab countries around them. In 1977, the Egyptian leader Sadat made an appeal with Israel to settle a war that had been going on for years. Of course, I'm going to be honest with you, all of the disputes over in the Middle East have been going on for centuries, upon centuries. Carter is, and I don't know if you remember me saying this in an earlier video, he actually was a Bible teacher. He served in the military, actually on a nuclear submarine. Carter is unbelievably smart, and he is also very religious. He's from Georgia. He's from the South. Of course, Southern people are religious, okay? That's what we do on Sunday, okay? That and barbecue and the Cowboys games. But with that, Carter invites actually these two leaders, Egyptian leader Sadat and the Israeli leader Benin, to the U.S. to negotiate terms of a peace agreement. They actually meet at a place called Camp David, and I'm sure you guys don't know what Camp David is. Maybe some of y'all do. It is basically the forest retreat of the president, and whoever's president gets to use Camp David and it's beautiful. It's in the middle of nowhere, very safe, and it's unbelievably beautiful. So Carter says, hey, come on over to basically my vacation home in the mountains, and let's sit down and let's honest to God talk about this. And let's talk about how the Israelites and the Arabs can maybe sit down at a table, get over their age-old disputes, and let's talk about how you can coexist in the Middle East together. I'll tell you the story in class. I don't want to, take it too long, but a lot of this dispute has gone back to the time of the Bible, where there are two brothers, Isaac and Ishmael, and they do not get along. In fact, they hate each other. And of course, Carter, being a Bible teacher, knows the story behind it, and he really can try to talk to them. The Camp David Accords is what they will become. Highlight, circle, massive, are the biggest success in Carter's 4 years of the presidency. I need you to write that out beside there. Biggest success of his presidency. Here's a map of the Middle East. It's basically a powder keg of dynamite, okay? And of course, Israel is at the very center of it, surrounded by many Arab nations, and a lot of the people would say it's a very big target of those Arab nations. But I will tell you, Israel is very aggressive in defending themselves. It's one of those things where you are on one side or the other, and that is the way it is. The United States has often been seen as a protector of Israel, of course, because we are that freedom of religion kind of ideal. And of course, you know Jerusalem, center of Israel. Celebrating the Camp David Accords. Here they are. Benin, Jimmy Carter, and Anwar Sadat will meet. They will sit down. I'm sure they will curse. I'm sure that there are ugly things said, but in the end, Carter knows enough and is a good enough man to get them to agree on peace accords. And with that, the Camp David Accords becomes the most unbelievably positive, successful thing in the Carter administration. And I'll be honest with you, one of the most positive things in the Middle East in a long time. It would be amazing if we could have something like this again. But Carter did it, and it's his biggest success. It's his ribbon he wears on his chest for his presidency. And he still is very active in the region today. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Cold War. Ooh, boy, it's starting to, remember, it was getting colder during détente, okay? It's starting to heat up a little bit. During the Carter years, the Cold War rivalry between the U.S. and the USSR widened due to the fact that SALT II failed. Remember SALT? The Senate did not ratify SALT II in light of the USSR's invasion of Afghanistan. We want to underline that real quick. USSR's invasion of Afghanistan. I hope you paused and get this slide down because it's a pretty important one. If you didn't, do it now. Underline invasion of Afghanistan. We're actually going to help the Afghanistani rebels fight the USSR in this time period in the late 70s. We actually are going to give guns to the rebels of Afghanistan, including one man named Osama bin Laden. Unfortunately, we do have a record with him actually helping the Afghanistani rebels fight against the nasty communist USSR. We take part of a new arms race. The USSR adopted new missiles, and we are going to see them adopt new submarines. So we are going to step up our missiles and submarines. Now we are not limiting arms, we're back to building them. Unfortunately, this is not going to be good. We also are going to increase, and you need to go ahead and make sure that you get down just somewhere, increase U.S.-Sino relations, and that's going to freak out the USSR because remember, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. They start to freak out. There is going to be a lot of new technology under this time period because we are going to start the arms race up again. When the USSR invades Afghanistan in particular, we really start making some guns because we're freaking out even more. New missiles, all kinds of stuff is going to be built. So actually, the Cold War does not get colder during Carter, it gets hotter. Détente ended. So at the very end of Cold War, I want you to put a start. Détente ended when the USSR invaded Afghanistan. So Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The U.S. interpreted this attack as a move to take the Middle East and spread more what color? Red. And we're again starting to think about the dominoes. And we're like, oh no, if Afghanistan falls, then so does Iraq, then so does this, and so does that, and so does Saudi Arabia. And also remember, all these countries, they got oil. We need that oil. If they become communist, we got a big problem. So we do a couple things. I need you to get down under the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, these three things. First thing we do is we do an economic embargo of the USSR. We refuse to trade with them. It's a far cry from Nixon trading $1 billion of grain with them under détente. We also are going to boycott the Moscow Olympics. That in particular is going to be more of a symbol, but it definitely shows that we have a commitment to not entertaining this communist aggression in Afghanistan, and we will aid the Afghanistani resistance. And I already told you that gets a little bit hanky when we give some weapons to some guy named Osama. Carter hoped to limit the nuclear arms in advance of human rights. He found himself in a heightened Cold War, so his human rights are going to kind of take a little bit of a nosedive. Here's the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. Here's the Soviet Union right here. Here's Afghanistan. And remember, when one domino falls, they all fall. So we really freak out. We send aid to Afghanistan to fight back to the USSR. And that's, of course, where we start to see the American involvement in Afghanistan. There it is right there. So, long story short, it gets really, really ugly. The ugliest is this. Pause this, get it down, Iranian hostage crisis, because I'm going to talk pretty fast. I'm running out of time. All right, the Camp David victory was offset in 1979 by a situation in Iran, the hostage crisis. What had happened in Iran is there had been a revolution. The exiled Islamic fundamentalist Ayatollah led a coup against the U.S.-backed Shah, or leader, basic president of Iran. One thing that is going to happen is the Shah is kicked out of the country, and actually the Shah, who this Ayatollah religious leader had taken and kicked out, needed medical treatment. Ooh, here's what happens. In fact, extra credit for anybody can tell me what medical treatment the U.S. gave to the Shah, but we let him into the U.S. for medical aid, and irate mobs in Tehran, the capital of Iran, stormed the U.S. embassy and took 52 hostages. Here is a literally picture. Here you go, Ayatollah. Here's who's taking over. And here's an American hostage from the American embassy that these basic rebels took. What happens is Carter tries to, and here's the next part of this, diplomatic, military, and economic threats failed to bring the return of the hostages. Remember, 52 people being held hostage, all because we gave medical treatment to someone. Carter approved there had actually been a rescue mission that was aborted after 2 helicopters crashed. He approved it. And when this picture, hits the United States news, it looks like Carter is an idiot who his helicopters crashed. Now, interesting personal history here. The helicopters, this squadron, actually is the squadron my brother flies V-22s for right now. So when we were in Washington, D.C., and we visited Arlington National Cemetery when my brother was honored just recently in Washington, D.C., I got to see the headstones of the guys who were on these helicopters, and it was my brother's squadron and their unit that was in charge of these helicopters, so kind of sad there. But long story short, stuff like that happens. Unfortunately, those pictures paint Carter as a bad military leader. The hostages are still not going to be returned home. These blunders and basically the inability of Carter to end this hostage crisis in 1979, I remember 1980 is the election, are going to hurt his bid for the President of the United States. Again, those pictures worth 1,000 words. They think he can't bring him back. They think he's a bad leader. They don't vote for him. A failed presidency. I hate saying that, but I think it was. And it breaks my heart because he was one of the best men to ever occupy the Oval Office, in my opinion. Best-hearted, best-souled men. I would love to meet him. Carter's failures with inflation, Iran, and Afghanistan overshadowed his foreign policy victories of the Panama Canal and the Middle East. He viewed the Panama Canal and his human rights as a victory. The failures of Johnson, Nixon, Ford, and Carter basically lead to a desire of Americans for a strong leader. I don't think they cared if it was going to be a Democrat or a Republican. They wanted a strong leader. They wanted one who could talk straight to you, that could put on a good show, and that could get crap done. And there had been a Republican, actually he ran in the 76 election, who was up and coming, and he actually was very, very influential, and he was very strong. He would be called the great communicator. He could talk to you. He could get his message through, and by God, you were going to do what he said. And so literally in the 1980 election, the Democrats and Carter had failed. A lot of people were looking for this hero to come in, and I'm going to be honest, he did. Approval rating, 23%. Yeah, that's pretty bad. You might want to add that. Of course, he's not going to get reelected. But who is? Ronald Reagan. You'll get the music later.